The big thing, Russell Wilson. There were some speculative reports coming out yesterday about maybe potentially some destinations, some teams where Russell Wilson might be willing to waive his no-trade clause. Those teams include the Giants, the Saints, and the Denver Broncos. If, in fact, that Russell Wilson and the Seattle Seahawks look to part ways after the 2021 season, as we talked about, they could be looking at rebuilding. You don't rebuild with a guy like Russell Wilson. You let him go somewhere else where he has a chance. So, gentlemen, your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I'll jump in first. The teams that were listed that Aaron Schultz, I believe, was the reporter on Twitter. He's a podcaster, does a great job. The Saints, obviously, for the last 2 years have been a preferred destination. That makes a ton of sense from just a schematic standpoint. The Giants were the team number 2, and team number 3 escapes my brain this second because I'm 42 years old and sometimes I forget things. What was the third team that was involved?
Denver Broncos.
Of course, Cody remembers that. The Denver Broncos are number 3. Selfishly, I'd like to be at to see the Giants because I want New York football to be good, right? I want, that's what I want. And they could actually make it work financially. They're up against the cap, but I feel like you send Daniel Jones back to Seattle, who'll need a bridge quarterback, and throw a first-round pick their way and restructure a couple contracts that'll work. The Saints have no money at all, right? They're $59 million over the cap already going into 2022. They're going to have to make some massive, structural financial bookkeeping changes and maybe cut a bunch of guys and try to find some trades. But again, we say this every year and they still manage to make it work.
That's exactly what I was going to say.
That's the one job I never want, is to be a salary cap cruncher. I'd hate it. I'd be miserable.
And for the Denver Broncos, it just makes an enormous amount of sense because you put a quarterback on that team right now and they could compete for a Super Bowl. Like you put a quarterback, a healthy Russell Wilson on that team right now, and there's nobody that I'd say they couldn't beat. And they've already beaten the Cowboys pretty handily without a real quarterback. So, but selfishly, I want to see him go to the Giants because the league is better when the New York teams are good.
Yeah. No, I agree. And I think, too, the Giants, the appeal there, look, you got Kenny Galladay, you got Slayton, you have Evan Ingram. The reality for a lot of these wide receivers, Sterling Shepard, too, is trying to stay healthy. And you have a very capable running back in Saquon Barkley. I definitely think if Russ were to go to New York, they'd have to change something up. They'd have to bring in an offensive coordinator that's going to fit maybe that scheme to what Russ likes. And then you have to have that preference right there. And, I think a team like the New York Giants, I think they'd be okay with saying, okay, hey, Russ, what do you want to do, right? Giving him that organizational input that he just simply hasn't gotten in Seattle. The Saints, on the other hand, we mentioned the salary cap too. You have Alvin Kamara, don't get me wrong. And I think you have a pretty solid offensive line and a run game there. My biggest question is going to be skill players, receivers. Yes, there's Michael Thomas, but then again, Michael Thomas may not even be on that team very much longer. So
probably won't be.
It's just New Orleans looks like a very rough place. And I know they really want a franchise quarterback. Nothing against Taysom Hill. He just ain't a franchise quarterback. He's a weapon, right? And he's going to do something for you, but he's not going to be the guy that can go down and win you games. And I think that's really the dilemma there. We talk about the Denver Broncos. You have a young guy in Javonte Williams. You have an offensive line with some young pieces, and obviously a left tackle that's solidified there in Garrett Bowles. And then you have Cortland Sutton. You have Jerry Jeudy still on his rookie deal. You have Tim Patrick, who you just extended as well. And you're going to have KJ Hamler back next week, next season, who is an absolute speed threat. The dynamics there are interesting, not to mention a defense that has a lot of young talent and a lot of young contracts as well. I mean, Denver, I think if Russ wants to win and have a chance, like you mentioned, Adam, I think Denver might make the most sense for where he should go. But if we're talking about just the markets being competitive, the Giants, I think, are also another great destination.
I'm really interested in it because the Giants have all those weapons, but they don't have an offensive line. I mean, that offensive line is horrific. So they would really need to throw assets at that. Something that the Seattle Seahawks really never ended up doing for Russell Wilson. And it comes down to between them and New Orleans, I think. I think it really just comes down to, would you rather be protected or would you rather have the weapons around you? And I also think that it is easier to build a team or easier to draft, find, pay wide receivers and weapons than it is to find offensive linemen. I just think with the way that the NFL is today, with the way that athletes are today at the wide receiver position, I think there are more of them. I think that they are becoming to be more a dime a dozen on the outside. So I think that they can find guys, find weapons that fit Russell Wilson, at least because he is a bit of a niche quarterback in the way that he plays the game. You can get some downfield guys, and I really think that Saints offense could be a lot of fun. But just selfishly, I want him to go to Denver. First of all, it keeps him out of the NFC. I'm never going to hide my Cowboys fandom. And also, just because, guys, like you said, Cody, they have a ton of weapons, man. They really do. They have all of those wide receivers stuck there for a long time at this point. Jerry Jeudy's got years left on his contract. And then they also have the very, very young and very, very talented RB2 of the NFL draft for your own Dalton Miller, Javonte Williams. So I am very, very excited about that offense. It would be so much fun to watch Russ in it.
I will say this. It would be kind of cheap, I guess, if they bought another Super Bowl. First they did with Peyton, and they do it again with Russell. Come on, draft and develop.
Listen, winning's winning.
Get your own guy.
It costs. Well,
winning.
that's the issue. Is Denver's had a really hard time, I think, generally. I mean, outside of John Elway. John Elway was their one guy that they've gotten that was their guy, that they've molded into being the guy. Ever since then, they haven't. It's been the quarterback. I'm sick of seeing the quarterback carousel graphic for the Denver Broncos on these game broadcasts. But I do want to bring up one more final point here on Russell Wilson. Adam, Dalton, I'm eager for your thoughts on this. Russell Wilson has expressed the desire to one day have some sort of stake, ownership in an NFL franchise. The question is, maybe if he does leave Seattle, does it influence him to go to a place that maybe has a stable front office where he can also, not mention have input, but also be able to collaborate for when he's done with football? That's another question.
I don't know.
I think he's just going to let Sierra pick.
That's what I'm saying. Yes. And that's why I think New York probably is where he ends up.
The man,
if he has his say of it.
But here's the deal, though. I think like here in 2020, look, this isn't no Carmelo Anthony la situation, right? Where we got to leave Denver, we got to go to New York for your acting career. Sierra's big. She can go anywhere. She can do it.
That's still an open wound, by the way, for Cody. You heard the derision dripping from his lips.
The only reason is because Chauncey Billups was included in that trade package. You know, the king of Park Hill. I was not very happy about that. But outside of that,
Russell Wilson could be an owner of the Green Bay Packers right now. All he needs is $300.